Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Abacare Recovery's Listen Up podcast. I just want to remind all our viewers, if you can follow us on all the kind of major platforms and tune in and share our episodes with family and friends. Today we've got the pleasure of welcoming Andy McLaren to the podcast. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Andy's a former professional footballer, Scotland internationalist, and he's going to share a wee bit today about his journey through his football career and also a bit about his recovery, if you're comfortable with that, Andy.
No problem, Eddie, yeah.
Brilliant. So if you want to start us off, tell us, you grew up in Castlemilk. How was life growing up in Castlemilk?
Hi. It was an experience. Listen, growing up in this game's it's tough, you know what I mean? You see and experience a lot of things that you think are normal, and then you get a wee bit older and a wee bit more experience in life, and you realise a lot of the stuff that you seen and took part in wasn't normal. But it was part of growing up. As I say, growing up in this game, it can be tough. Listen, it can also be brilliant as well. You know, there's a lot of good times as well. But I've seen a lot of stuff that kind of impacted on me later in life and led into certainly some of the addiction problems and that I had as well.
Yeah. So as you said, it's kind of only in hindsight we can see that stuff then when we start putting stuff together later on in life.
Well, when you're in about it, it's just the normal, that. You know, you don't know any better. You know, I grew up late 70s, early 80s when Castlemilk, it didn't have a lot of facilities in it, if I'm being honest, you know, so gang fighting was a major part of growing up in Castlemilk. Certainly there was probably about 5 or 6 gangs, and there was certain streets that you knew if you're a young age you couldn't get into that street or you couldn't get into that bit or whatever. But as I say, for a young age I played football, so I kind of broke down the barriers as such, because you played football with our boys for different parts of the scheme and stuff like that. And as I say, growing up in Castlemilk, see if you could fight or play football, you were alright. See if you were good at school, you're bullied. That's the truth of the matter, you know what I mean? So I couldn't fight, but I could play football. So that kind of it earned you friends, it earned you a bit of respect as well, you know what I mean? Even with the older boys, if they know you could play football, they kind of took you under your wing a bit.
No, totally. That's what it's like for myself growing up as well. And it's something that maybe doesn't get spoke about often enough, into the healthy side of that, you know, kind of young boys like ourselves growing up and being part of like a boys' club or a school team or whatever. And because it was the same where I grew up, like outside your scheme was a bit a no-go area, you know, but there would be young boys for certain schemes who were maybe involved in certain gangs and stuff who'd come together. And that.
Yeah, I'd certainly broke down a lot of barriers for me, you know, like I go to 13, 14 and I could go anywhere just about in the city because you knew boys through football. Yeah. You know, I've got pals today, I'm 52 now, but I've got pals that I met when I was maybe 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old through football, you know, and listen, you don't see them all the time, but when you do see them, you just pick up from where you left off, you know, so football's such a powerful tool for that, you know what I mean? Well, for me it was anyway. It got me out that area and got me having different experiences as well, you know, because that's what life for me is all about, you know, trying different things, doing different things, not everything I like, you know, but I try things now, and that's all down to football and the kind of the grounding it gave me, you know what I mean? You know, like I always knew for a young age that I was good at football, and I wanted to be a football player, but everybody I knew wanted to be a football player. You know, every young boy, that was a dream, wasn't it? You know, we all dreamt about scoring at Hampden or playing at Ibrox or Parkhead or whatever, you know, that was what we done for a young age. And then growing up and getting to 12, 13 when clubs were beginning to look at you, you know, and clubs were, we used to have scouts coming up with our door all the time in Castlemilk, and like I say, we did have a lot. I was talking to my mum about it the other week. One of our couches was broke, and we used to have to put a big bit of wood under it. You know, so you'd have scouts with Man United or Dundee United, and you're making sure they're sitting in the right bit of the couch and all that, you know what I mean? But I was never embarrassed about it back then, you know, because that's the way everybody was, you know what I mean? As I say, we never went to bed hungry or that, you know, but listen, I know what I know what being poor is, you know what I mean? I know how that feels, you know what I mean? And I don't think it leaves you, you know. No matter how well you do in life, you can still go back to that any time.
Yeah. So what kind of age group is that where scouts are starting to look at who you playing for at that time and stuff?
I started playing, I think I was about 6 or 7 year old. I started playing with a team. I remember my debut. It was a Team Clyde Boys Club. It was Mrs. Craig and Mr. Craig, and they were brilliant. I just wanted to get away in something in the scheming and stuff like that. And I went and played. I was maybe 6, 7 year old. And my first game, I was a sub and I came on. They told me to come on and play left half. That was how long ago it was. And I didn't know my left from my right. So I just went on and stood somewhere. They took centre and blew the whistle, and that was the game finished. I never even, so that was my introduction to football. But then, as I say, you kept going to training and you kept getting a wee bit better. And probably about 12 year old, that's when scouts and that started seriously looking at us. I was playing with Clyde and I was Celtic Boys Club, and there was a couple of boys clubs that wanted me to go, but I was kind of loyal is the right word. You know, I wanted to stay with my part. I see boys now and they're all they want to go away at 12, 13. I had to fall in love with the game. You know, I fell in love with the game and I wanted to play with my pals. You know, I'm 12, 13. Football's no right. Well, according to all the experts now, it's very complicated, but it's not that complicated. You know, for me it was falling in love with the game first, and then you become teachable, don't you? You know, and I done a lot of my stuff myself. You know, like working on my left foot, working on weaknesses. Used to just go and kick the ball against the wall. You know, and like I watch games now, and you see the ball bounce, and I know why the ball's going to bounce. It's not because I'm some experts, because of the thousands of hours of work I put in. You know, me and my brother we'd a red ash park just across us, and as soon as we came in for school, we'd get the trachea on and we'd go there and we'd take shots into each other. We'd just kick the ball against the wall and see what way it spun, and you know, different play wee games. You know what I mean? It was just all about that. It was just about getting comfortable with the ball and having the ball at your feet. I just loved playing football for a young age. That's all I wanted to do. See if I had a ball at my feet, I was quite happy.
Was there any kind of major influences in your life at that time that maybe were footballers encouraged you, or was it your brothers, or was it something that came from yourself? Bernie
Slavin, who ended up playing with Middlesbrough, but he was playing with Albion Rovers at the time. But Bernie stayed just a lang for us, and he used to commentate with school team training. Right. We just play wee games and that, but it was like, I remember thinking, this guy's a professional. Bernie was playing with Albion Rovers at the time, but he was a professional football player, you know what I mean? And I think he used to have a golden boot and all that in Scotland, and he's the first person to score 30 goals, and he'd won that. That was just before he got his move to Middlesbrough. So it was guys like that. But there was always guys in the scheme. There was a boy, Drew McBride, as well, who I looked up to. He'd went to Man United. Drew was maybe 3-4 years older than me, and I knew he'd went to Man United. It was Jim Mackey and Alex. Castlemilk, there was always players, you know. And you used to think, if they can do it, I can do it, you know. Whereas nowadays, I don't think there's that much talent coming out of the housing schemes now, is what there used to be. Listen, every housing scheme had 3 or 4 guys that you could say, oh, he came for there or he came for there, you know. Castlemilk had hundreds of boys, and there was loads of boys that everybody could play, you know. Like, I remember, I think I played in the school team when I was about primary 2 or primary 3, which back then was massive, because it was a big thing to play for the school team back then. It was like there used to be trials, and everybody wanted to play, you know what I mean? The school football and all that's, it's not the same now, but certainly back then, everybody wanted to play football. You know, they say how I don't think we've got the same talent pool to pick for. That's one of the reasons why it's not the same, because when I was young, everybody played football. That's the truth. And everybody, not everybody was brilliant, but everybody was technically all right. They could control the ball and they could pass it, you know, and because that's what we've done. There wasn't much else to do.
And And how was life for you at that time? Did you use football as some kind of escape? Maybe you spoke there about a wee bit, maybe kind of experiencing kind of poverty, younger years and stuff. Was
that was my escape. That was where that was my happy place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was, as I say, you've seen a lot of stuff, violence and stuff like that. You know, I've seen people getting stabbed and all that when I was young, and you used to laugh about it. You thought it was a game, you know, because it wasn't you. It was happening to you. It was older guys, and it was just the norm, you know. But I knew for a young age, I don't want that. I was scared of it. I'm going to be honest. You know, some people revel in it. You know what I mean? And they enjoy violence. You know, I knew boys like that. You know what I mean? They enjoyed a punch up and they enjoyed. I didn't. I didn't. It scared me, you know what I mean? It scared most people, but a lot of people had a front for it, you know what I mean? They'd front it up, but, you know, as I say, football was my escape for the kind of the gang violence that you could easily get caught up in, you know what I mean? And
when did that first move take place where Dundee United approached you?
Well, I used to, before Dundee United, I used to train with Hearts. I used to train at Helen Vale, up in Parkhead, and Hearts actually offered to sign me. It was Alec McDonald's the manager. I think that was it'd have been about 84, 85, and Hearts had a really good team. They were going to win the league the year after that. But they told me, we want to sign you in an S form, and I'm like, oh, brilliant, aye. And they told me to make my way through to Tynecastle and go to the front door and ask for Alan McDonald, and I'd go in and sign, and I went home and I'm like, I'm not doing that. And I look back now and nobody in my family drove, and we didn't have a lot, so it would have been a big deal for us to go through to Edinburgh and get trains and buses and whatever, you know what I mean? And I'm like, no, if they want me to. But I think at that time I knew that my man that probably didn't have the money for me to get through there anyway, you know what I mean? So I made it as if I'm not that boring, you know what I mean? I don't want to sign with him. If somebody wants to sign me, they'll date in my terms as such, you know what I mean? And then, as I said, around about that time, I was training with a few teams, and I started training with Dundee United, and played a few games with them, and then they asked me to sign. But they used to take you like summer holidays and like Easter holidays. They'd take you up to Dundee. So I remember going up there at 12, 13, and you'd get into training, and you'd train with like the first team we brought around our boot, and it was guys that I'd watched them I'd watched them get the Champions League semi-finals, and guys like Paul Sturrock and Dave Neary and Paul Hegarty and all these guys that were legends, and they're talking to you, a wee guy at 12, 13, and there was no airs and grace about these guys. They were just so humble and I'm like, I've watched these guys, and watching guys in the telly back then was a big thing. We just spoke about it, how there's that much telly on that much football on the telly now. Back then, if there was a game on the telly, everybody was watching it. And like Dave Neary for me was one of my earliest, it's not my earliest memory, but it's one of my, Dave Neary scored in the 1982 World Cup. He scored against Brazil. And I was maybe 9, 10 year old, and that's when I was getting the real bug for it, and I'm thinking, I want to imagine doing that. And the 82 World Cup in Spain was like dead colourful, and Scotland were playing Brazil, and you'd all the Brazilians out and all the colour, and I can remember thinking, wow, imagine getting to that level, you know, and big Dave Neary scoring that goal, and 7, 8 years later I was sharing a dressing room with him, you know. And that's you look back then, you know, like, I remember vividly, I can shut my eyes and I can see myself, me and my brother, sitting in front of the telly watching Scotland versus Brazil, you know, and that was one of my earliest, I'd love to do that, you know what I mean?
I remember leaving the house after the World Cup final there, and with a ball, and I'm like, this is it.
Tardelli scoring in the final, remember Tardelli's, it's iconic, like his celebration, but I watching Scotland then, and as I say, you're beginning to go up and train with Dundee United, and that opened up horizons for me as well. It opened up a different way of thinking, you know, because I'm leaving Castlemilk and I'm going up there and I'm seeing a different world. Yeah, you know, like I thought my world did revolve around about 3 or 4 streets back then, you know, because you couldn't get into it. So that's, and football began to open up my horizons, began to see there was a big world out there, you know, and I wanted to go and experience that. And like I said, I was decent, I was good at what I'd done, you know, and that was what I'd done. I played football all the time, you know. I would watch sports scene on a Saturday or a Sunday, and I'd maybe see somebody scoring a goal, and I'm going to go out and try and I'm going to coach. That was what we done, you know. He didn't get coached as such. I seen something and practiced it, you know, because they say now, oh, he's not well coached. And we weren't coached. We just worked hard on our talent. You know what I mean? We worked hard on our technique. You bounced the ball against the wall and it improved your touch. You know, I speak to young boys now and they think, oh, you've got some magic thing you're going to tell them. It's hard work. That's what's going to get you there. You know, it's no doing this or doing that. It's a full package, and it's basically working yourself. You know what I mean? Because I go to 16 and people think you sign schoolboy forms, and that's when the work begins. You know what I mean?
So how did that feel at that point, Andy? Like, how did you feel like that? Did you take it in your stride, or did you have a? I was never intimidated, like on a football part or going into a football. That's where I felt I belonged. I could be intimidated in loads of other different settings, but knowing a football part or knowing a football dressing room, you know. So I felt that's what I wanted to do, and that's what, you know, I was going to work hard at it. You know what I mean? And other parts of my life probably suffered as a result of that. You know, like, I didn't go to school as much as I should have. And I wasn't, to be honest, I could have done better at school, but I wasn't interested. That's the truth of the matter. I was concentrating on my football career. I'd be training most nights, and that was a good thing as well, because it was, although I did end up an addict and whatever, but it kept me out a lot of things as well. 12, 13, 14, they kind of years where it's easy to get sidetracked. You know, I seen boys that were good players, but I never missed training. I never missed a game. You know what I mean? Listen, my life could be a wee bit out of the place and other things, but football was, I was so focused on that. You know, I can't remember missing training. I remember I was reading an article and it was saying, like, to be a professional athlete, you need to have done 10,000 hours of training. Right, okay.
I couldn't do that up. I think I'd done that by the time I was about 12, 13.
Yeah.
Because all we done was, after we'd play football at school, you'd play football at dinner time, you'd play football at play time, you'd get home after it, and then I would go training, you know. And even if we were just out with the boys, you'd have a ball about with you and just kicking the ball against the wall and whatever, you know. So it was, you didn't think you were practicing all the time, but you were.
Yeah, you didn't have to go out your way to do it, like a conscious decision.
No, it was just, you always had a ball about you. You always, as I say, we didn't have a lot of other stuff in our life, which probably helped. You know what I mean? We didn't have computers, we didn't have games consoles, you didn't have mobile phones, we very little apart, but you didn't need much. You see, if you had a boy, you were quite happy. Well, I was anyway.
So I kind of remember around about that time, I was probably still playing boys football myself at that time, and Dundee United's name used to come up a lot with scouts, didn't it? They had a really big
They had a great youth policy. Wee Jim was massive on that, you know what I mean? And that was one of the reasons I signed there, because, as I said, it was bigger clubs. But even my dad said to me, he says, you know, you'll get a chance here if you're good enough, you'll get a chance. And that's how you want as a young boy. You know, you're going to, if you go there and do well, you get that opportunity. And you knew that with Dundee United. I'd seen it. I'd seen boys that I knew that they were a bit older than me, and they were getting up there and they were in the first team at 17, 18, you know. And so I knew there was that pathway there. And it was just up to me to work hard and keep improving that. And that's what I done in my football career. And outside my football career, no. But as I say, I had that focus to be that's. See, to be honest, I don't know what I'd have done if I hadn't been. That was the one option I had. You know, I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have Right, well, if this doesn't work out for me, I had nothing. I had all my eggs in the one basket, and I was going to be a professional football player. That was because I don't know. I generally, I've no other skills. My wife will tell you, man. She tries to get me to paint and all that. And I say to her, if it doesn't involve keepy ups, I can't do nothing. You know what I mean? I've not really got many other life skills. I've learned other things along the way. You know what I mean? But back then, I'm like, this is it for me.
Maybe sometimes that stands you well, isn't it? Because it has to be.
Yeah, that's it. You know what I mean?
So when did you eventually get your kind of debut with Dundee United? How old? Who was it against?
I went full time when I was 16. Just before that, the World Cup came to Scotland, and I played in under-16 World Cup. So that gave us a right taste for being a professional. You know, there was a crowd that it was in Scotland. The opening ceremony was at Hampden, and we stayed 10 minutes for Hampden. Castlemilk's 5-10 minutes away. We used to sneak down at Hampden during the summer and go and sneak on the pitch and score goals, and then walk up the stairs and kid on you were lifting the Scottish Cup. You might be 10, 11-year-old, and fast forward 5-6 years, I'm playing the World Cup for Scotland, and Pelly's doing the opening ceremony. Pelly's getting along, shaking everybody's horn, and I'm like, wee guy for Castlemilk, and played the that. We got beat in the final. It was Saudi Arabia, but we beat like Portugal, who had Figos and Costas, and we beat Germany, and but Saudi Arabia were cheating bastards, if I'm being honest. These guys were about 30, you know, they had beards, and we get beaten penalties, and I scored a penalty. It's no money, only 3 or 4 people can say they scored the World Cup final for Scotland. I should have probably retired after that. But then just after that, I went full time with Dundee United, and that meant moving away from home as well, and that was a big thing, you know. People used to say to me, how can you be homesick for Castlemilk, you know what I mean? But it was home, it was what I knew. I'd all my pals there, my family was there. I used to go up in the morning, a Monday morning, and I'd get the bus for Castlemilk into St Leonard Square, walk up to Queen Street and get the train up. I mean, I'd just turned 16. Imagine asking young boys to do that now. They'd be like, oh, I can't do that, you know. But that's what I had to do. There was that was the way you had to get up. And my first couple of months up there, I struggled a bit. You know, I was homesick. Away from home. It was the first time you'd really been away from home, away from your man, away from my pals and stuff. But I made my debut the year after. I think it was a year or 2 years after. But my first year up there, there was 3 big things happening. I moved away from home. I came down one road one weekend, and my girlfriend we're still together, my wife today. Yep. She told me she was pregnant. Now we're both 16. It was a big shock, you know what I mean? Yeah. It was a bigger shock for her because her life's changed. My life didn't really change, if I'm being honest. My wife had obviously hopes and dreams and things she wanted to go and achieve, and that all get put in the back burner. And then a couple of months later, I was in training, and the manager pulled me and says, I wanted to see you after training. I'm like, Jim McLaren, if he wants to see you, it usually meant you were in trouble. That was the truth. And I'm thinking, so I'm racking my brains. I'm like, what have I done? I've not done nothing. What's she want to see me for? And I went in, and 2 of my uncles were sitting. I knew right away was something wrong, and they told me that my dad had died. I mean, my dad was only 33. My dad drank too much. I don't know if he was an alcoholic. It was up to him. But he drank too much and went to bed, never woke up. And I was 16, I had 2 wee brothers and a wee sister, and my ma was a young woman left with 4 kids, and I can remember thinking, right, I've got to be the man in the house, and I've got to be I was a kid, you know what I mean? I didn't. And round about that time, I should have probably went and spoke to somebody, but there was none of that. Back, that was 1990. You didn't show your feelings, your emotions back then. That was just the way it was. I'm not calling anybody. That was the way life was. You didn't show your feelings. You didn't show your emotions, especially in a football dressing room. A football dressing room was ruthless back then.
What did you do with the emotions then, and do you feel when you get in there, you're middle of training, you get told your dad's dead? Does the club follow you up in that, being a young boy?
No, not really. See, to be honest, no. I went. My 2 uncles were there. They took me down the road.
Okay.
I went down. My ma and all that were in my granny's. The next couple of weeks, I'm going to be honest, a blur. Yeah. My dad got buried, and I can remember I can remember being at the funeral and somebody saying to me, "No, don't you greet today." That was the way it was. Listen, that was the way we were programmed back then. You've got to be a man and this. And I can remember, and now that I think about it, I'm like, hell, imagine, you know what I mean? Yeah. Your dad's just died and somebody's saying you better not greet today, you know what I mean? No, there was no. I maybe took 2 weeks off, and then went back up to Tannadice and back into your digs, and there was nobody went, "Listen, if you're struggling, come and see me." There was not. I can't remember anything like that. I'm sure I would remember if something like, but there was no support network running about you. There was no. I remember I'd been in the digs one night and burst into tears to two of the boys that were in digs with me. Boy Tom McMillan, boy Graham McShane, and then after I stopped greeting, I started getting embarrassed. That's what we were doing it. Yeah. And I'm sorry. And the boy Tom was like, "Listen, you're alright. You've got a lot going on and all that." But that was probably that was me letting it out. You know what I mean? And it was maybe 5 minutes. I had a wee greeting, and it was like, I've made an ass of myself there. That was the way I felt. Yeah. You know, I felt embarrassed. I felt I felt embarrassed. I'm like, don't say anybody at the park. No, you know what I mean? It's mental. You're 17-year-old, you've had all this you know, and you're scared to tell somebody you're struggling. But that, because like I say back then, it was seen as a sign of weakness, I think. You know, we're getting better. I still think we're miles and miles away from it.
People didn't know how to react to it then, didn't they? Because they had never had it or never had kind of support for our emotional kind of stuff. So they were scared if somebody showed emotion to them and shut it down.
100%, you know, like even when I got a wee bit older, the pubs and all right, you drinking, man. If you just said to somebody, "I'm struggling," it'd be no up and have a beer, or there's a line in there for you. I was just nobody, because we were all kidding on, we were something we were no most of the time, you know what I mean? We were all at some points we were all struggling, you know, but you weren't going to tell anybody that. That's the truth, you know. And certainly for me, I wasn't going to, you know. There was maybe some people that would have, but I don't know if I seen it as a sign of weakness back then. Definitely, you know, they'll think less of me. That's what I used to worry what people think about you, you know. That's, I couldn't give a but back then it was an image thing as well, wasn't it?
So see, at that time when that happens and you're back at United again, I mean, you went on to be a solid first team player for years with United. Was there any difference in maybe your kind of drinking?
Oh, of course,
anything after that?
I started using drink and drugs as...
Is this at an early age?
Aye.
United?
Listen, I was drinking before I went to Dundee United, that's the truth. Like, after that World Cup final, Gary Boland came up to my house in Castlemilk, and we were going to a party in Kirkintilloch. One of the boys died in Kirkintilloch, and he says, right, I says, just come up to mine. He died in Dundee. I says, and we'll go there. And then, so he's like, right, we've got to get a carry out. And I says, aye, we'll get a carry out. So he's come up to my house, so he's like looking at me, he's like, what have we got to do for a carry out? I says, right, come on. Walked into the pub. Now, we've been on the telly that day, played an under-16 World Cup, and I've walked into the pub, and Gary Boland's looking at me, he's like, what are we doing? I says, just come in. I was like, he's two pints, and gonna use a bottle of vodka and 6 cans, and the woman's like, oh, Andy, you done brilliant today, son. You were unlucky. She's like, there you go. And Gary Boland's looking, because back in the days,
I know.
See if you had money to get into a pub, it didn't matter what age you were. I can remember getting into a pub, coming in the way home from school, you know what I mean? The pub in Castlemilk I drank in, it was like a gang hut, you know what I mean? It was a great pub, it was a great boys in it, but that was what we done, you know. We just drank. I'd started drinking at a young age, and I realised very early that I can use this. See, when I feel see if I have a drink, all these feelings go away. You know what I mean? And I've done that all throughout my drinking, all throughout my using. I say about it, it's like getting out your heat, and that for me was the magic of it, getting out your own heat. You know, like trying to escape, because my heat's no new, but back then there's a million things going on in it. You know what I mean? And it can still be that today, but I know how I can deal with it today. Whereas back then I didn't have any coping mechanisms or anything like that. The only coping mechanism I had was drink will sort that out, or take a line, or take an ecstasy, or whatever. That was, so I was basically compressing all these emotions down. I was using drink and drugs to self-medicate. That's what I was doing, you know, because I had all these horrible feelings and emotions, and any time I felt like that, I would go and get drunk.
Yeah. So your career went really well with Dundee United.
Listen, I broke into the first team about 17, 18. I made my debut at McDermott Park. I came on the last 9 minutes against St Johnstone, and I'm thinking, right, I've arrived now. That's me. I'm a first team player.
Yeah. And
I remember Maurice Malpass coming up with me after the game and saying, right, hard work starts now. And I can remember thinking, yeah, but I know what he means. You know, it's easy to get into the first team. See, the good players stay there and play week in, week out, week out. You know, many boys have you seen that are going to be the next best thing, and they get into the first team and get a new contract and get a couple of quid and buy a new motor and think they're the B's and E's. And Dundee United kept you grounded that way, you know. So I made my debut, and then the following, the midweek game, we played Montrose in the League Cup, and we won. And I went to get my wages the following week, and it was over $1,000. And like, I'm 17. I think that's the most money I've ever seen. Yeah. It's like won the lottery to me, you know what I mean? And I'm coming down the road now, and you've got a couple of quid. And my mates were going to raves. And what I should have done is come home and sat in the house with my wife and my wains and being a good professional. But you're 17-year-old, you've got a couple of quid in your pocket. You want to enjoy yourself, you know what I mean? And that's what I done. And by the way, all my drinking and using and all that, I had loads of good times in it, you know what I mean? Like 16, 17, there was you get that wee honeymoon period, didn't you, where life's good. And like I say, the 90s was good times, you know. There was people with a wee bit of money, and there was a lot of stuff going on. The music scene was brilliant. The rave scene had exploded. Football was good. It was just... It was a good time, you know.
Like the peak of humanity, isn't it?
For me, it was. It was, and even like I say, and people laugh, but ecstasy had a positive impact on Castlemilk. I don't care what anybody says. Like, I went for there was maybe 5, 6, 7 gangs in Castlemilk, and I can remember when I at a rave one night, and there was a guy that you never went near. He was a psychopath. That's the truth. He'd killed people and everything. You know what I mean? And we were always wary of him, you know what I mean? And he's got a hold of me, and I love you, wee man. And he's full of you know what I mean? And I'm like, hell, man, I've seen that guy stick knives in people's throats, you know what I mean? And it kind of stopped all that. The gang fighting and all that stopped in the 90s. Listen, they were all make money off it as well, you know what I mean? That was the thing, but it was positive in a way, you know what I mean? Like, listen, a lot of people get you know what I mean? But at the start, it was all good and love, and people got to raves and dancing. But it was good times, you know. I'm not going to sit here and say it was all doom and gloom and whatever, you know. But then I didn't know what ecstasy either. So you come a Tuesday or a Wednesday when that come down kicks in as well, you know, and you feel like you don't know why you feel that bad, you know. And so I was doing that most weeks, you know. So it's maybe a Wednesday or a Thursday before you feel normal again, and then it's I'm not doing it this week, and then you get back down the road, and so it was like a squirrel cage you're in, you know what I mean? And but the football was going well. I used to say, oh, it wasn't affecting my football. Of course, it was affecting my football, but I was still doing well. Like, I played in the Scottish Cup. 20-year-old, it was, you know, I won a Scottish Cup at 20, and I just thought my football career was just going to take off, and it would have done. But my drinking, and because I've got a bit more money now, and listen, I was insecure in my own head, you know, like, you put there playing in front of 10, 20, 30,000, and it'd be wee bits you going, I don't deserve this. I never felt worthy a lot of the times. I could front it up, you know, and I was confident on a football part, but there was always that wee bit in the head, like, if they knew the real me, you know, like people singing your name and stuff, and I never felt kind of worthy of that, you know, because of some of the stuff that happened in my past and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And just, and that's where, again, we're drinking drugs, because I could get into any company, and I was never shy or anything like that, you know. Some people need to drink to speak to a woman or do this or do that. I was never, but it just gave me a confidence, like a piece of, I don't know, it's a hard one to explain, but it just gives you that kind of wee something extra, you know what I mean? But that didn't last long either, and then you didn't want to be in the places, you wanted to just sit yourself, you know, that's where it was getting for me, you know what I mean? Because I was now abusing it, you know what I mean? It wasn't.
So see, through that time at Dundee United, Andy, was there times where managers, fellow players are saying, Andy, you need to watch what you're doing?
There was a couple of times, there was a couple of, I remember crashing a motor once, and I thought, I'm f***ed. And there was always things where I was going to screw it up. And I would maybe stay off it for 2-3 weeks.
Right.
And it's easy to do that, innit? It's easy to get a couple of, back then it was for me anyway, like, I could go a week or two, but I was a dry drunk. I'd been in the house and I'd be moaning at the veins, and I'd be moaning at her, and looking for an excuse to go and drink again, you know what I mean? It was like, I'll stay off it, but it was explained to me, it was like, a dry drunk, that's what I was, you know what I mean? I was just waiting in the next chance I could get to go and get a drink, you know what I mean? I remember wee Tommy McLaren coming at my house one night and talking to me, and I remember one of the club doctors giving me a number. He says, I think you've got a drink problem. I'm like, I've not got a drink problem. If I'd have stopped drinking when everybody else thought I had a problem, I'd have probably been about 14, 15, you know what I mean? But it's when you start feeling it, innit, you know. But I remember one of the doctors gave me a number and saying, phone that number. And when I went back to Dundee about 10 years later, no, it wasn't, it was maybe about 5-6 years later, I'm saying, what was that? And he couldn't remember it, you know. I'm like, you gave me a number to phone somebody once, and I was just nosy because I was in recovery by then, you know what I mean? But there was times where people did, but listen, you're 21, 22, you're fucking, I just thought I was having a good time, you know what I mean? I didn't, and it was listen, I'm an addict, so I was a selfish bastard as well, you know. It was all about me and how I felt, and you know, about my wife and my wains or my family. It was all, listen, I've had a lot of shit in my life, you know, like to myself. I wouldn't say that to anybody, you know, but because we're good at playing the victim as well, aren't we, you know what I mean? And it was always, there was always a bit of, that kind of, I deserve a drink sometimes, you know what I mean? I deserve to go and get mad with it, you know, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And
I think a lot of people think with people who, when you first realise maybe you've got a problem, it's a lot of years after that before you even voice that to somebody. Then it's a lot of years after that, usually, if you're going to get some help, isn't it? You know,
100%.
when it's like, so
if you went when everybody else thought you had a problem, you'd be there 10 years earlier, wouldn't you? Well, if my wife would have, she could have probably told you that when I was 16, 17, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm like, she's just moaning or whatever, you know. But listen, I'd watch my dad die, and I can remember thinking, I'll never end up as bad as that. You know what I mean? So that's alcoholic behaviour already, isn't it? You know, you're saying I'll never get in that state. And like I say, I did. You know, I end up.
So fast forward the tape a bit, Andy. Time wise, you moved to Reading from Dundee United. With the legend, it was Tommy Burns at the time as manager. Did you have a relationship with Tommy Burns before?
No, I hadn't met Tommy. Briefly in football and that. I went down, and again, that was a big chance for me. You know, I can remember being on the flight down, talking to myself, going, right, get down here, get off a drink, get off the drugs, get your career back on track. I was 25, 26 by this point, and listen, 3 or 4 years previously, I thought I was going to the English Premier League or sell it at Rangers and a big massive team, but my drinking and that took her, and it was my fault. It wasn't anybody else's fault, you know. I I was always one of the fittest guys in the club as well, and I'd lost a bit of fitness and all that. When you're doing what I'm doing half a park, your fitness is going to go. And I went down there and we had a good chat with Tommy. And Tommy spoke to us about it. He's like, what do you think? And I done my usual. I think Tommy heard about my drink, because football is a village. And he's like, I heard you've been drinking too much. I says, I know, but the manager's this. And it was always somebody else's fault. It was never my fault. I says, but I'm down here and I want to get a right go. And we started. First game was against Man City. I get man of the match. First month, I get player of the month down there. And it was like Man City. We played Fulham. My second game, and it was I remember a big boy, Philip Albers.
Yeah,
scored the chip. I remember playing against him, and he was about 6'5". He was brought like a brick. He could run, he could play, and I'm like, what you meant to do with these guys? You know what I mean? But I thought, if I get myself back fit again, and I'll just go back up the leagues here. But I remember the flight going down and talking to myself and saying, right, just get down here and get a new. You don't know anybody down here, but Reading's 10-15 minutes outside London. So, and I've got a few quid now. I know a couple of boys in London. My wife was going to come down later on. So I'm in a hotel, and if it was bad up the road, it snowballed very, very quickly down there. It was tough, you know. Football wasn't. I mean, I used to love football. I used to love getting into the dressing room. Even that wasn't doing it for me now. I wasn't getting nothing out of that now. Jim used to say to me when we were young, me and Big Duncan Ferguson, if I sent your wages to the house, you wouldn't come in. And see, at that time, that was a lie, because I loved getting into training. I loved training. I loved training hard. But at that time, if you'd have sent me my money, I wouldn't have needed training. And it was horrible, because I couldn't do what I used to be able to do as well. You know, just simple things. I could beat a man and cross a ball, and all that stuff. It was just mental. My head had just gone by that point. You know what I mean? And then I'm on a training ground one day, and I see three guys walking there, and I said to one of the boys, who's that? And he says, it's the drug testers. And I went, oh. You can imagine, it's just a sinking feeling in your stomach, because I know what I'm doing. I know what I've been doing the night before. And I'm like, hey, how the do I get out of this? I'm like, by that point, my dad's about 10 years dead, and I used to talk to him. Never anything good. It was always when it was something. Dad, get us out this one, and I'll not do it again. And I before I went into it, because at one point I'm like, just collapse. Like, I was on the training ground. I'm like, I just kid on, you've took a heart attack or something, man, and get carried out, and then I'll just run off a training ground. But I'm like, do you know what? See, a part of me, I needed something. I needed help, but I didn't know how to. Being through where we're fair, we're no good at saying I'm struggling here. That wasn't in my makeup at the time. You know what I mean? It just wasn't me. So I went in and took that drug test. And
did they have to get drug tested, or did
no,
you get
there was a few. Listen, it says it was random. I don't think it was random. But see, to be fair, I sit here and know it's the best thing ever happened to me. I wouldn't be sitting here with you and Eddie. I genuinely believe that if I hadn't took that drug test at that time, I wouldn't. My dad died at 33. I don't think I'd have reached 33. That's just, like, physically I was all right, but mentally I was shot. You know what I mean? I hated what I was doing to people that I said I loved. You know what I mean? I'd tell you that I'd kill for my weddings and I'd kill for my wife, but I couldn't put a drink down for them. Yeah. Or I couldn't stop shoving stuff up my nose. You know, I couldn't. You know, if it was, it's a terrible thing. But if my wife done it one day, she fun up a bag of my gear, and she went inside of that, or me in the veins. But I'd already had a couple, and the addiction had kicked in. I went, give me that, and I ran out of the house, and that still haunts me to this day.
That's the reality.
I've tried to make amends to it, but I've done like that. You know what I mean? I took that out of my wife and veins, and back then I'd have told you I'd have killed for him, I'd have died for him, you know. But that's what addiction does, you know. The people that you love the most, because you'll hurt them the most, because they're the ones that keep putting up with it. They're not putting up with it, but they're going to be there because they love you, you know what I mean? And they're the ones that get, because if you get pals, they eventually, him, he's a you know, they'll move away, but your family are your family, and they were the ones that were there with me when it came on top, you know what I mean?
Sometimes, you know, kind of working in this field and stuff like that, and listening to families and what that feels like as well. I always remember kind of saying, we had the luxury of getting stoned or high or drunk or whatever the thing was. They're sitting there with raw emotions, 24/7, sleepless night. That's far more painful. You know, we speak about the pain of addiction and stuff, but it's only kind of in hindsight again that you understand how bad that is.
She doesn't know if I'm going out and she doesn't know if I'm coming home that night. She doesn't know if I'm alive or dead because you're no phoning, you're no telling them where you are. So they've got all that, you know what I mean? And you, like you say, you're lying upside down somewhere, no thinking about them, not in a bad way, but your addictions took over, you know what I mean? Like I spoke to you, I mean, I thought I was in rehab for a month. My wife assures me I was for 2 months. So that shows you she was living it. She was living it more than me. Because she's got a family to bring up as well. So, my wife used to say she's 3 wins, you know what I mean? And I was the biggest one, you know what I mean? And they're the ones that are, because like you say, we're numpty at half the time, aren't we? You know, and I was always going to change, you know. I hated what I was doing. I didn't, listen, that's addiction for you. You know, I'd be taking a line going, I know what this is going to lead to, you know what I mean? But I need to do it, you know what I mean? And it was a horrible place to be in at that point, you know.
Purgatory, isn't it? Once you're at that point, you know the consequences,
you know
but
what
you
you're doing, but you can't. Because you need to, and it wasn't even giving you a sense of, it used to calm you, you weren't getting that towards the end, you know what I'm talking about, you don't get that, it's just
consequences.
It's just, you just get it, and then and you think, oh, all right this time, and it's the definition of madness, isn't it? You know what I mean? You're doing the same thing, and you're expecting a different set of results, you know, and that. So this time it'll be different. This time it'll be like the good old days when you've been in a nightclub and my last wire that I using was horrible. You know.
So was it from that kind of positive drug test? Was it the English
FA, and the boy Brendan Batson, who was in charge of the English PFA, and I used to say that they were great with me and all that, but see now that I've got older, and they hung me to dry a bit. That's the truth, you know, because I was an easy one to give up. They're not going to give up. You've seen all the rest of the ones that have been Ferdinands and all that, but they had a brand to protect. You know, I was easy one to give up, you know, and like at that time it was horrible, you know, like I failed that drug test. I had to go to a hearing in Leeds, and I can remember going down there myself because I didn't tell anybody. I was embarrassed and didn't want anybody to know. And I went to that hearing, and it was the first time in my life I'd been honest. They asked me if I was struggling, and I says, the only way I could describe it was I need help. And he says, right, we'll get you help. And I'm like, brilliant. But then he says, you've got 10 minutes to tell anybody. And I'm in Leeds, so I can't tell my ma or a phone. I can't tell other people. And he says, and by the time I walk from the station to for the hotel to the station, I've got people on the phone, you're our news. And I'm like, oh, f***ing sake. And at that point, honestly, I stood at a train station, and I thought, I'm going right in front of a train here. That's the best solution here. You know, everybody's sick of me, but at this point, in my head, everybody's, you know, people still love me and care about me, but in my head, I'm a pest to everybody, and they'd all be better off without me. And that was my thought. I said, I'm going to go in front of a train. And I didn't. I went and got carried out. That was my other solution. I went and got carried out for the train up, and then for a week or two it was like first item in the 6 o'clock news. Front page of every newspaper. It was, and for me it was fine. I'd done what I always do. I had it the way, you know, but I had kids at school. Imagine going to school, your dad's on the front page of every newspaper. My wee granny, Claire's wee granny used to go to chapel, you know, all these things, you know, all these people that loved me. By the way, and every one of them were right there with me. You know, not one of them turn their back. Listen, it gave me a time to grow up. Listen, they didn't understand addiction either. That's the thing, you know. It's you've got some old woman in her 70s just stop drinking, son, you know. And if only it was that easy, you know. But all the people were unbelievable with me. My wee mod, like, you know, breaking their heart, you know what I mean? But like I say, they were all there. Not one of them shut their door on me or whatever, you know. So I was very, very lucky that way, because a lot of the time I didn't give a about anybody by myself, you know. It was like being an addict's a selfish thing, you know what I mean? We'd argue that we're no selfish and we're no this, but the proof's in the pudding, innit, you know what I mean?
So see at that time when something like that happens at a football club, what happens to your relationship with Redden, with Tommy Barnes at that time? What happens?
Redden, my contract, Tommy left by that point. It was a boy, Alan Pardew, who was, by the way, fair play to him. He wrote me a lovely letter and all that when I came out of rehab and stuff like that. And he'd actually spoke to me when he came in. He says, listen, he says, I know you got a drink problem. He says, I know somebody that died with that. He says, I'm not worried about you getting back as a football player. I want to get you back. So fair play to him. And then when I did get back, I phoned Tommy and apologised to him. And listen, Tommy, he's like, listen, you don't need to apologise to me, son. You're all right. That was his words. He says, I'm glad to see you back. He says, it's good to see you. I actually spoke to him after we played Castlemilk, and I had a good wee chat to him then. And I was trying to apologise, you know what I mean? And Tommy had a wee kind of idea of addiction and things like that as well, you know what I mean? So he's like, listen, it's not about me, son. He says, it's just you get yourself sorted, you know what I mean? And that was the way everybody was just wanting to help, you know what I mean? And I got a lot of as well. I get a lot of when I came back, like when I signed with Castlemilk and came back, like every game I played, I'd get dogs abuse.
The opposing fans.
Oh, it was
players.
No. A couple of times players, but mainly fans. Like my first game back was at St Mirren. I hadn't played for 8-9 months or something, and I hadn't been on a foot apart. And I wasn't. I was expecting stick, but the stick I go, I'm like, it took me back a bit. You know what I mean? I was playing right in front of their fans the first half, and it was just. And then people say, "Oh, you better get used to it," but you never get used to it. You know, listen, you're a human being. You know what I mean? It's like people think football players are immune to all that. You know what I mean? Listen, you've same life the same as anybody else. You go to your work some days and you're in a mood. You know what I mean? And you've got 5,000 people calling you a junkie and alky and shouting other and but the drunkest guys in the place there shouting you're an alcoholic, you know what I mean? And it was tough. And listen, there was many times that my wife got to a stage where my wife knew just to leave me after games. So if I came in, I would, if I'd done or it was a bad game, I would have a couple of hours to myself, just process. And it's hard because you're going for the adrenaline of playing in front of, maybe playing at Celtic Park or something, there's 50, 60,000 there, and your mate just came home and just switch off and just get back to normal life, you know what I mean? And that, during my using, that's what that done as well, you know, because you maybe play a midweek game and you finish at 9:30 and you're high as a kite, you know what I mean? You can't, the adrenaline of that is better than any drug I've ever took, you know what I mean? Like scoring a goal or something like that, you never get a feeling like that. And your mate just come in after that and just switch off game and go to sleep. And, you know, it's...
Once you get into that lifestyle and it's not normal, is it?
No.
A professional footballer, you know, the highs and lows that you're speaking about there, the fans that love you, the fans that hate you and stuff. And if you think about the ages of people like that in a football career, you're a boy.
Well, that was the thing. It's like, and there's no training for it. You know, there's no... And... See, like people with mental health problems, it's the worst job in the world. You know what I mean? For somebody that reminds, because you're going from there to there to there to there, and in a matter of minutes sometimes, you know what I mean? It's like, you know what it's like, and when you're in recovery, it's try and keep a steady balance in life, and it's impossible to do that in a football career. You just can't. You've got injuries, you've got loss of form, you've got just there's so many variables in it, you know what I mean? So you can I honestly believe that all throughout my football career I struggled. I don't think I was ever 100% mentally right. Because it's just because of all the variables, you know.
So you spoke there, Andy, about getting into treatment, rehab it was, you went into. Was that through the club or the PFA?
No, the PFA paid for me to get in for it. Okay. And I can remember it was a Saturday afternoon, I'll never forget it. One of my wee mates took me into the Priory, and I can remember signing the forms, and I think it was about 12 grand. I can remember going, I've not got that. And they're like, no, it's already been paid for. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. And it was a Saturday afternoon, and I can remember getting in. That's just how mad I went and bought new clothes and all that for getting into rehab. Like, because I was thinking, if I get in there and I didn't drink the night before, and I can remember getting in and I sat, the night before I was rattling, and I'm like, no, I'm not drinking, because if I get in and they smell drink off me and all that, and get into rehab, that was how insane it was, you know what I mean? I'm thinking, if I go in there and I don't smell drink, they'll maybe think, oh, he's not got a problem, let me go. That was sort of, I didn't know nothing about it. I generally didn't know nothing about it. Yeah. And I went in, the boy Ken, he says, were you drinking last night? I says, no. He went, you should have. And see, for the next week, man, that's all I can think of. I'm like, you bastard, that's that. Yeah. But when I went in there, I was in there for a week. That was the first week in there, I hated it. I actually walked out one day and walked back up the road. It was a bit of an hour walk, but I'm like, I can't do this. And then I was arguing with somebody was talking like it was probably me who was talking like you know what I mean. And I just had, and I'm like, I can't do this, and just got up and walked out. And they phoned me, and I went back, and then I began to say, listen, I was withdrawing off drinking drugs. I was out of the place. I hadn't been eating. I started eating. I started feeling a wee bit better. The Pride is on the south side, and I said to them, listen, can I go a run? So like, aye, fine. So I was going out wee runs. I was beginning to feel physically a wee bit better, you know. I was eating, and I'm thinking, right, what the am I going to do now in my life? You know, because I hadn't been sacked by Red, and I'd arranged a pay off before the results, or else I would have get sacked. So I'd no club.
How old are you at that time?
I'm 26.
26, yes.
I'm 26. I've got a wife and 2 wains. And I'm thinking, when I left Reading, I think I got about 40 grand. This was in January. And I went into the Priory in March, and I think I had about £1 left. I was just, I was using it like ridiculous every day. And I'm like, I've no money. I need to, how am I going to support my family? And I thought I was going to have to go and get a job. There's a couple of clubs. Berwick Rangers says they would give me a trial, and I'm like, I maybe need to go down that level and then work my way back up. But I went away on holiday, me and the wife and the kids, and I came back and I was feeling good. I was going to AA meetings. I'd go to a sponsor. Well, Jimmy wasn't really a sponsor. Jimmy was just my pal. He used to threaten me. He used to go and say things like, if you drink, I'm going to bat your cunt and all that. But it was what I needed, you know what I mean? It was, but he was brilliant. He used to come in and speak to my wife and my wains, and I went on holiday and I came back, and my agent at the time says, right, what we got to do? I says, can you get me on somewhere? And because I was beginning to look a bit better. I'd been on holiday, had a wee bit of tan, and he says, can I go on? I went on Friday Sports Scene, and I says, listen, anybody give me an opportunity. If I mess up, if I drink again, you can just rip up my contract. And about 4 clubs got into contracts with me. And I went and met Bill Williamson, and right away, you know, you just got a feeling. And I liked him. He was a boy feaster, as you knew. He called a spade, you know what I mean? And I signed there, and it was unbelievable. Because Jimmy, I was about 2 or 3 months sober, and we were going to a meeting one night, and Jimmy says, you'll play for Scotland. I didn't have a club. And I'm like, you're mental. He's like, I'm telling you. He says, I guarantee you. He says, you do what I tell you today. He says, and you'll play for Scotland. Amazing. And I'm like, right, fair enough. I says, I don't believe you. I says, but I'll go for that. A year later, I was playing for Scotland. You know what I mean? So he'd more belief in me than I had myself, you know what I mean? And like I say, I went into Castlemilk, what a dressing room that was. We and Durant, guys like that one, were just brilliant, you know. We Durant, he kind of took me under his arm. Listen, he slaughtered me every day, but that's the way I felt with the dressing room is. But he'd slaughter me and then he'd take me in and have a wee talk with me. And I was doing all right with the recovery. I was feeling better. Having a breakfast in the morning before I got to training. Just simple things, you know what I mean? Taking the Waynes to school. Life's just started getting so much better. But life still happens. I still have ups and downs a day, you know what I mean? Life's no... I thought once you stop drinking, stop using, life would be perfect. No, the postman still puts bills through your door. People still get sick and no well. And listen, I have bad days and all, you know what I mean? I have ups and downs, but the good days are merit away the bad days, you know what I mean?
You spoke a wee bit there about kind of getting into treatment, introducing you to and getting the support of people in and meetings and stuff. Did you go on to have kind of one-to-one kind of therapy as well?
That was massive for me.
Some stuff.
That was massive for me. Like, Jimmy used to always say, like, hey, I'll stop your drinking, but I'll not fix your telly. And I used to wonder what the fuck that meant, but I know what it means now. It's, hey, it's there for your drinking. You know, people getting there with... I had loads of other issues that A wasn't going to fix, you know what I mean? And get into therapy. Listen, that was about 8-9 years I've been sober and fighting all this stuff that because I didn't have drinking drugs to get through it. You know, and I go to a stage where I'm a long time after drinking, but my head's probably worse, you know. And I went and seen a couple of therapists, and one thing it just wasn't right for me. And then I met Angela, and honestly, it opened the door, and I just went bang, I'm going to be all right. It was incredible. It was like it was spooky, you know, just and like my first session was meant to be an hour, and it was 2.5 hours, and it was as if somebody had just lifted the weight of the world off me, you know, because I spoke about things that I was never going to tell anybody. That's the truth. And then I wrote a book and wrote about it all anyway. But that was such a good thing as well. It's so cathartic because you're reading about yourself. Because I would have sympathy for you, Eddie, but I wouldn't give myself that. You know what I mean? I was that poor soul. He's the hard time. You know what I mean? But I wouldn't give myself that. You know what I mean? Because that's what we do in it. You know,
it's another part of that kind of old school conditioning we come up with, isn't it? You can see other people's stuff and be empathetic and stuff like that. But we
wouldn't get it ourselves. You know, I was very, very hard on myself. I should know, but I didn't know. So how can you know better if you don't know? You know, it was like it was that kind of thing where but going and speaking to another human being and somebody that knew that we're talking about, because I do bits of work now and you hear people, if you just talk, you'll be all right. No, because I've spoke to people and felt worse after it. You know what I mean? You've got to speak to the right person, you know, because. And it's all this stuff all the time now. Just this mental health stuff, it's okay. And it's no, you don't just go and open yourself up to somebody, you know. You've got to be very, very careful with that as well. I always say that, you know, it's don't just talk to somebody because they don't know how to open you up or shut you back down and stuff.
We spoke about it a few times on this show with different guests, this kind of social media thing, just going on there and getting really vulnerable people who haven't got a solution to what they're doing, you know, and ending up in a far worse place. And you're right, it has to be opening up at the right time with the right people, you know.
Because I've done it and felt worse. I'm going to be honest. I've opened up to people and felt like early on and I felt worse for it, you know. So be careful who you're opening up to. That's the one bit of advice, you know, because there's people out there. It's a business to them as well, you know. It's fucking, you know, it's they want people to be sick because they make money off it. That's, you know, it's I do wee bits and pieces now, but I've got a family, I've got a life, you know, and I don't want to get bogged into all that all the time, you know, because it drains you as well. It drains you, you know, if you're trying to help people, you've got to help yourself. You've got to be in a good place yourself before you can go and. For me anyway, go and give something back, you know what I mean?
Definitely. I wish we could speak forever, Andy, but we're nearly there time-wise. Usually we ask every guest, I forgot to say it earlier, usually ask them to choose 3 significant songs, no 3 their favourite songs, but 3 significant songs that mean something to them. But because of the time, I'm going to ask you, can you name us one significant song and the reason why it's so significant to you?
Don't Look Back in Anger, Oasis.
Okay, what reason?
I've got a video with all my goals on it, and it highlights of my career. And when I booked lunch, they done it for me and they asked me my song, and it's the word in it, and then just it played a big part in my life at certain points as well, you know. But listen, I could give you 100 songs because I love my music and all, you know what I mean. But no, Don't Look Back in Anger for me is a biggie.
And just to finish it off, Andy, you were saying there about the guy Jimmy that was supporting you and stuff. You ended up getting your Scotland cap exactly a year later, didn't you? What did that feel like, getting called out after everything you'd been through?
It was incredible. Like, I can remember standing listening to national anthem, and people go, "Oh, fucking national anthem, whatever." It was honestly, I could feel myself going. Christian Daly, who I knew if he had been 12-year-old, and he knew what I'd been through, he kind of squeezed me a wee bit, you know what I mean? I'm like, Christian, don't do that, you know, because he could obviously see it in me as well. So actually, when you play for Scotland, if it's not a qualifier or a World Cup game, you don't get a cap. I get 2 strips, and one of the strips went to Jimmy. And he's like, he was in his 60s, and he's like, we have done all right. I've got a Scotland cap at 60. You know what I mean? So that was. I just listen. As I say, he believed in it. He believed that I was going to get that Scotland cap, and I didn't. You know what I mean? So he probably deserves it as much as me.
Unbelievable achievement, Andy. Andy, thank you so much for being a great guest and coming on again. Thanks for spending the day with us, getting a bite to eat together. You're a great guy, and we really appreciate you coming on there and sharing your story.
Eddie, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, man. Thanks.
Cheers, pal. Thanks.